Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for attending MCE's 2021 Failtail Cup. I'm Inaya Abdelgaber, and I'll be your host today, coming to you live from St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador. To start today, we would like to acknowledge that the lands on which Memorial University campuses are in the traditional territories of diverse Indigenous groups. We also would like to acknowledge with respect the histories and the cultures of the Beothuk, Mi'kmaq, Innu, and Inuit of this province. We encourage everyone to reflect on the lands on which you are located and the Indigenous people for whom these lands are traditional territories. Our event today is unique in that we're not only celebrating our failures, we're also rewarding them. On your road through entrepreneurship, there are going to be many mistakes, mishaps, or even major flops, but that is completely fine. Actually, it's a good thing. These are expected and they help you learn, grow, and innovate to do better next time. Today, we have two panelists joining us. Hopefully, Patrick will be able to join us later. There might be some technical issues, but right now, we're going to have Sarah Murphy with us on stage, and she's no stranger to entrepreneurship. She'll be sharing her failures with us as well. So please welcome Sarah Murphy. Hi, Sarah. How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm all good. Thank you. Well, I'm really happy that you're joining us today here. And thank you so much for helping us normalize failures. And we'll ask you to briefly introduce yourself and your current role before we jump into a little bit of a Q&A.
Yeah. So my name is Sarah Murphy. I'm a partner with Polaris Venture Capital. I used to have a tech startup based in St. John's. It was called Sentinel Alert. I don't actually remember how many years ago it was now, but I think like 4 years ago. And I raised VC capital at the time. And I actually raised a second round of funding, but I chose to close my company instead and return money to my investors, which certainly was a challenging time and experience to go through. And I think we'll talk more about that today. And since then, though, I've worked with other startups in Halifax. I've started my own podcast, Rival and Queen, and most recently joined Polaris Venture Capital. So nice to be back working with those people who invested in me in the beginning.
Awesome. Well, it's great having you with us, and thank you so much for sharing your story. So, and that for that brief introduction. So, first of all, we have one question, and we're going to start with, what was your biggest failure in entrepreneurship, and what did you learn from it?
So, my biggest failure, as I kind of just touched on, was my company didn't work, and we had raised a lot of money. But ultimately, the reason that we didn't work, I knew early on was going to be a problem, and I didn't address it, mostly because I didn't know what to do with it. We had a lot of challenges in our team dynamics. I really didn't know what to do. And over time, kind of that elephant in the room became bigger and bigger, and eventually became something that, was kind of impossible to get around. And so, even though I had no idea what to do about it, by kind of ignoring the problem, it didn't help it go away, obviously. And by the time I was willing to kind of bring it forward to my investors and to other people, it was almost too late to deal with it properly, and to the detriment of the company. And so basically we got to a point where it was so hard to kind of make up the problems that we had in the company, that we just couldn't continue on. It didn't make sense for us to keep going. And I think certainly not a regret, because I don't regret anything. I'm very happy where I am right now. But if I think back to that, I knew very early on, I remember being at Propel, ICT. I did it in Fredericton, New Brunswick, actually. But, within kind of the first 6 months of my company starting, before we raised money, and knowing in my gut that there were issues, but I didn't know how to address them. And I told myself I would deal with them later, and I never did. And so my co-founder and I, although we got along great and he was very talented, we never quite saw eye to eye on things, and we really struggled to communicate in a meaningful way. And when you have a startup, it's, especially in the early stages, it's all about the people more so than systems. And you need to have those strong abilities to communicate. Otherwise, things get lost, or the company can't move forward in a progressive way. So for me, that was the most challenging thing, and probably my biggest failure was that I didn't address that issue or bring it out into the open soon enough. Even though I had no idea what to do about it, there were people who could have helped me.
Yeah. Okay, so that will lead to my second question. And as I said in my introduction, we all know that it's important to learn from our mistakes, and sometimes that can help us be innovative and grow to better learn and do something better with that next time. So why do you think people are generally afraid to fail?
Well, I don't think failure's fun. I think, we feel like we're judged on our failures when certainly we aren't. And it doesn't feel good for anyone. But I think in the context of this, especially when it comes to startups, failure isn't like a stopping of your abilities. It is really just a recalibrating and a narrowing in on the right path. And that's such a fantastic way to think about it. You never lose someone said this to me recently, you never lose your skills. And so even if things kind of blow up in your face or don't work out, you still have the skills you develop through that process. And we may not enjoy the process of failure, but it's an incredible teaching mechanism. I don't think the goal should be failure. The goal is to succeed, but inevitably that path is not straight. It is winding. We will have hiccups along the way. And those are incredible opportunities to learn from if you are willing to kind of sit in them, face them, and pay attention to what came up for you and how you can do better going forward.
Awesome. Okay, and another question we have is we always see from research that women are typically more risk averse and they aim for perfection before taking any big steps. Why is this not conducive to starting a business, and what can individuals, particularly women identifying students, do to overcome this barrier?
This is such a trap I think we fall into. And I will tell you this right now, the things that I get hung up on creating, I'll answer this question properly, Moa. And I put so much effort into, I'm even like specifically thinking about the very first slide deck I made for a board meeting. I was so stressed about that. I like over-researched, like really went deep into what I was supposed to present. And it ended up being kind of like a standard for how some of the other companies were asked to present. But more so what I'm telling you that is it was just like insane. I was so over prepared, I had over created this document. And I see that so often in life. We always think that what we're building is not good enough. Anything that's near and dear to our heart, I think we're all kind of at risk of having that perception. But there's a lot of crap out in the world. And anytime, I still see this now, anytime I buy courses online or sometimes resources, I'm always shocked a little bit at what's included in them, because if I were going to do them, I would have to put in so much more before I would feel it was ready to sell at that kind of price point. And I always take that as a reminder that it doesn't have to be perfect. It's better to put things out there. There's a lot of crap in the world that people put out there, and not that that is your goal, but I think it is a reminder that don't just keep things in your head, start sharing them, especially if you're putting your heart in it and you are putting in a good effort. Trust yourself and your abilities that it will have value. And if you put it out there and it's not good enough, that's okay. Just adjust it, keep adding to it, and have another go at it. basically. And that applies to a lot of things. Like I always think of my first board meeting, my first board package, and I laugh at that one because what I found out a year later is one of my friends also had a startup. And he told me like a year later that one of the investors had showed him my board package and was like, yours needs to be more like this. But in my mind, I would have never felt that. I felt like I was underqualified, I was underprepared. And meanwhile, what I had presented kind of was being used to show others what their standard should be. But I didn't feel that. So I think there is this I don't know if it just applies to women, but there's certainly this connection to doing things well and wanting it to be perfect that I think we all have. And if you are putting value together and a genuine, earnest product or content or whatever it is that you're working on, it is safe to put it out there. And if you have blockers to that, start looking at them and ask yourself, like, why am I afraid to put this out? Is it real, or is it because I'm afraid of rejection? And then I always like to remind myself there's a lot of crap in the world. This can't be the worst thing out there. And that is more so just as a mechanism to push me forward when it's time to go.
Yeah, and I find that I know this is something that we hear all the time, that we are our own worst critics. And then if you're, for example, working on something important, a report or a pitch or anything, you start like, the more you look at it, it starts not making sense, or you feel like it's not good enough, but that's because you're only looking at it from your own perspective. But like sharing it with people, of course, and getting insight, that's important, because it could be great or it could need some editing or like some improvements, and then sharing it with other people will give you that.
100%. It gives you perspective. And so whether it's customers or just friends or people you're looking for feedback from, go to your honest friends who will tell you when they don't like something. My friends will do that for me today for any of the stuff I put out there. They text me and they'll tell me they don't like this.
Yeah.
Awesome. They do.
Well, I'm going to move on to our next question. And I would like to know, what was the most valuable piece of advice that you were given through your entrepreneurial journey?
That is a very good question. I think I can't think of one thing right now. I have a lot of pieces of advice from a man named John Phillips that have been very helpful to me, but I can't think of them right now. But the one thing I will say that you get so much feedback through your entrepreneurial journey. And one of the things I don't think people spend enough time cultivating is their own kind of guidance, and whether that's their intuition or their gut, or just relying on their own knowledge that they have innately. And at the end of the day, you were the person building the company, you were the person creating the thing. And so you need to feel connected to it. It's not to say you ignore all advice and put blinders on, but what I'm saying is you have to take your own kind of vision and guidance into account, along with all the other feedback that you get, because you know what is right to create for you. And at the end of the day, there's lots of different types of companies, and I'm a really big believer in this. VC is one of them, but not every business is meant to be a VC business, and there are opportunities out there that are very important, or could have a lot of value, or could be great for you personally, things that you want to create. And I just think some of the best advice that I've kind of picked up among people throughout my entrepreneurial journey is to definitely filter the feedback, because you are going to get a lot of it. Make sure you connect to it and really not pick the feedback, but recognize the feedback that you resonate with, and that really feels true and valuable for you. And remember to take your feedback into the mix as well. Make sure that the steps that you're taking align with your own values, align with your kind of purpose, what you want to create in your life, and that they feel good for you too. Because that is, I think sometimes we forget to check in with ourselves, but that is a hugely important piece of feedback as well, is does this still fit with you, and does it feel good to you in the way you're moving forward, and do you think it's the right way to move forward? I think that's a hugely important piece of advice. Another one that I'm a big proponent of is you have to take care of yourself. And that kind of connects with this piece of being connected enough with yourself. You have to get enough sleep. You have to, work out, eat well. If you actually take care of yourself, you're able to show up better. I mean, this might be lost on university students. Certainly, I did not do that when I was in university, but it's becoming more and more important in my life now. And I realize the difference and the impact it can have, especially sometimes when we're building things, we get wrapped up where it can feel really stressful. It's important to take care of yourself so that you can show up in your best way and your brain is working in the best way possible. And then you can create the best things. Like those are really important, two very important pieces, I think, for a long-term entrepreneurial journey.
Awesome. And we have a comment from someone from the audience here. They said that the most valuable piece of advice that they've received is that stop talking and start doing.
That is also very important.
Yeah, and first, before I go ahead with my next question, I'd like to encourage all the audience, if you have any questions, you can go on Hopin and post it there, and we'll ask it to Sarah. And right now, we have a question from the audience, and it's, how can we share more among the early stage entrepreneurial community to inspire others and help learn from their failures as well?
I think this hopefully is doing that. Who asked that question?
So this is from someone from the audience. I couldn't see the name, unfortunately.
Okay, that's fine. So they want to know how to share more early stage stories.
So they asked, how can they share more among the early stage entrepreneurial community so they could inspire others and help learn from their failures as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a great platform to do that through the Failtail Cup. Obviously, they're sharing kind of those failures, but you can also start telling your story. Like people are really interested in things like that, and social media is a great resource for that. I use social media a lot. I have a podcast. A lot of it is sharing our lives, and people really engage with that, and I think they take an interest in it. So certainly, you can tell your own story through your own social media. Slack groups and Discord groups are becoming very popular, and I'm part of those more, sharing kind of like honestly what's going on, but then also asking questions more than just sharing things. It's important to have a place to ask questions and get advice, and also that motivation when you're stuck. And so if you can find a group of people who are also interested in this, I think just having a channel to chat and talk regularly is incredibly valuable. And in terms of bringing the public out, I think, we live in an era of social media. People are interested in those things and showcasing others. I mean, I always use media for everything. I have a podcast, and that's the platform I choose, but you have to choose whatever makes sense for you. And if you're at MUN, I think working with groups like MCE, they're always open to different ideas. If you want to host events, you can totally do that too. It's a great way to create exposure.
Awesome. And we have another question here. How do you make sure to not get too attached to your idea?
Sorry, can you say the last part again?
How do you make sure not to get too attached to your idea?
I think that's where feedback comes in. Like, it's easy to get attached to your idea. And certainly this was one of my experiences, is like, we ended up at some point in my company, we had it was like a construction safety technology, where almost the upfront cost, because there was a hardware component with sensors to measure how workers, like their movement patterns. It just like, people weren't lining up to buy it. It took a lot of explanation to get them familiar with what the concept was. And like, we knew it was too hard. At some point, it has to click where people get what you're doing. If you tell 10 people about it, like a couple of them are at least going to say, oh my God, yes, I totally get what you're doing. I see the value. I think the things that make the most sense as businesses inherently kind of give you some aha moment for the customers when you're talking about them. Like they almost feel like it should already exist to some degree. And I think of Colab when I think about that. Like initially they started with 3D modeling. That's not what they're doing now. But when they told me about that idea, I was like, does this not exist already? Like it felt logical and it made sense at that time. And so always sharing what you're working on is with people to get that feedback, even if you're not selling them, really just the concept, see how people react to it, if it makes sense. And if it doesn't, start changing it and change how you talk about it. And I don't think we spend enough time actually trying to clarify what we do simply, because it seems kind of like a pitch or something that maybe doesn't have a lot of long-term value. But being able to communicate what you're creating is incredibly valuable because it helps people find you, but also it helps you recognize the things that are valuable about what you're building. And so you can find out the pieces that people resonate with. And I think you have to be doing those checks the whole way along.
Awesome. And we have one more question here, and I believe you touched up on it a little bit in the beginning, but what challenges did you face in starting up your business, and how did you overcome these?
I think that the natural challenges, like financing, was a big one. My parents thought I was unemployed for a long time. I was 20, how old was I? I think I was 24 when I started my business, 24, 25. And I actually started it through Startup Weekend, which was an incredible opportunity. We won that event and it was kind of like the catalyst to starting the company. And we had a lot of resources and support from that. So I'm very thankful for that opportunity. And I think as those come up, I encourage people to check those out. But certainly one of the challenges were that my family thought I was unemployed for a long time and just sitting at home and doing nothing. It wasn't until I raised money from Polaris and Killa Capital and angel investors that they believed I was actually working on something. So that was like a personal dilemma happening. Now they trust me. Now when I'm working on things, there's no like questions. They're like, they believe that I'm creating something. So that's good. And in terms of other challenges, like building a team is always challenging, right? Like you need to find people that you connect with, but who also believe in the vision of what you're trying to create. And that's really important. And it has to be people that you can communicate with easily, and that you trust each other's competencies, that are able to create things, that are willing to work at kind of the same pace. You really have to be on the same page about what you're trying to build, and make sure kind of your values align on that. So I think that would probably have been the biggest challenge. And on top of that, like I wasn't a technical founder, I was a business founder. So that always felt like a big hurdle for me, understanding, the technology and what we were doing with data. But you do learn and you do know what you're doing. And I think if you're in that position, like you have to trust yourself a little more. You have to do the work to understand it, but I always kind of felt like I was at a disadvantage and never trusted what I thought we needed to do from a technical standpoint, and that was wrong. Like I should have trusted myself more, and that was something that I struggled with kind of the whole way through.
Okay, and well, thank you for sharing that insight and for sharing the challenges. We have one more question here, and it is, how do you spot opportunities that are worth starting a business?
I think anything that gets you excited, honestly, or that you can't stop thinking about it. So we all kind of have different ways of being drawn to ideas. For me, I get excited. But if there's an opportunity that is just kind of keeps coming up for you, or you can't stop thinking about it, there's probably a reason. So start exploring it. And again, don't be attached to the idea. It might change, but it might be the catalyst that gets you onto something that is a really good opportunity. So if things pop into your head, definitely explore them. Look into what else is being done around it. Talk to the people around you. Talk to the people at MCE and see what kind of the feedback is. Because oftentimes when we get started with an idea, it is not the idea we end up building. It is more so a stepping stone that gets us to what we're going to end up building. Our ideas change as we go through the process of creating them. Once we get feedback, as we start trying to bring them to market, as we start kind of looking at the realities of how would you create them, things shift. When I started my company at Startup Weekend, it started as a travel app for safety, or a safety app for traveling, and then it became a construction application. So I think it is more important to get started around ideas or opportunities and start getting that feedback, because the opportunities are going to shift naturally. But certainly if there's something that keeps coming up for you or that you get excited when you think about it, I think those things are always worth exploring.
Okay, amazing. Well, thank you so much, Sarah, for sharing your insights and story with us today. And we're now going to switch gears and announce this year's winner of the Failtail Cup. But first, I'd like to thank all the applicants for applying, and though we would like to see an increase in the Failtails for next year, so keep an eye out for to apply next fall. So after reviewing the applications and evaluating who failed, but most importantly, learned best from their failure, the winner of the $1,000 prize, ultimate bragging rights, of course, and the MCE 2021 Failtail Cup is Herschel Despende.
Congratulations.
Yeah, you can come. So thank you so much. Congratulations, Herschel, and thank you for our applicants, attendees, and panelists for helping us celebrate these important moments. And congratulations again. That's great.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I'd like to just thank everyone else that put in an application. I think that was a great thing for everyone to do, and just remember that, you know, even if you don't win something like this, you still have the learning experience that you had from failing in the first place. And I think that failure is only failure if you don't learn from it. If you learn from your failure, it's a success in disguise. So, all right.
Awesome. Thank you and congrats. Okay. We welcome you all to our next event, Community Collision, on November 18th. Where Memorial students can network with the St. John's entrepreneurial community. You can always find more information on our website, mce.mon.ca. And don't forget to contact MCE to book a meeting with one of our 4 startup coaches or to find support and funding for your entrepreneurial journey. Enjoy the rest of your day and enjoy networking. We still are going to be open, the platform will be open until 10. And then we'll hopefully see you back soon. Thank you.